You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 316.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're all doing well here at the end of September. I am fresh home from a trip to Baltimore, Maryland, where I visited my oldest sister, and I had another sister travel to Baltimore also, and together with my sister's husband, we went to see Bruce Springsteen last weekend in Baltimore at Camden Yards. It was a lot of fun, and he put on a great show. And we thoroughly enjoyed being together and enjoying his music. Today, I have an interview on the podcast with Diana Goldman. And Diana is a chef, food photographer, and culinary educator based in Boston. She's the creator of Beantown Kitchen and the author of the new cookbook, Plants for You. Diana teaches in her work all about plant-based cuisine and shares her passion for wholesome, flavorful food, which shines through in every recipe she makes. In our conversation today, we talk all about Diana's journey writing a cookbook, her success with orchestrating testing with over 50 recipe testers, her tips for going pro as she learned from reading the book, The War of Art, and how she invites creative energy to support and inspire her when she's working on her food and recipe projects. And just as a little side note, if you have not read the book, The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, I highly recommend that you either listen to it on Audible or get a copy for your Kindle or a hard copy to read. It is a terrific book, one I turn to over and over again when I think about the role that resistance plays in the work that we do. And today, Diana talks about the book. She talks about what effect it's had on her work. And I think it's something that we can all benefit from if we are pursuing creative endeavors ourselves, or if we want to start a business or do something new. This whole concept of resistance is always present. And how do we handle that? I had just read this book. I was talking to my sister about it when I was in Baltimore, and we were talking about what if Bruce had not answered the call and let resistance get the best of him. He would have never performed the shows he's performed, had the career that he's had. I think he's written over 400 songs. He's been recording and producing and playing concerts since the middle of the 70s. And that much creative energy would have probably imploded on him had he been someone that let resistance stop him. So in any creative endeavor that we have, and I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to you about this, I think it's important to listen to the call, to not let resistance get the best of us. And if you're wondering what the heck I'm talking about, get the book, The War of Art, and listen to what Steven Pressfield has to say. And then also today, enjoy this interview with Diana Goldman. Hi, Diana. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Thanks so much, Maggie. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, excited to talk to you today, share your new book with all of our listeners. But before we get started, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, perfect. So I'm a plant-based chef and culinary educator. I teach cooking classes for the Sierra Club online, and I share planet-friendly, health-promoting recipes. I also share recipes on my site, Beantown Kitchen. I live in Boston with my husband, and I have 3 daughters who have grown and flown the nest.
Sounds familiar. I'm in that same boat. 3 children who have grown and flown the nest. It's a good feeling, though, isn't it?
Very good.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. It's, I think the bittersweet story of being a parent and children leaving is just exactly that. It's bittersweet. There's a lot of joys on this end of it, and something you wouldn't certainly want to have not happen for them. They're always so excited about it, but it's great to connect with another mom that has the same number of children and going through the same thing.
Totally. I mean, I think the pain is in them leaving the nest and being launched into the world, but that's definitely the reward as well. It's
Yeah,
very rewarding.
it is rewarding. I was excited to talk about your book and talk a little bit about the work that you've done in Plants for You. It's a beautiful book. And I think one thing that a lot of people are curious about when I talk to cookbook authors is like, why a book? Why did you decide you wanted to write this book also, this book in particular?
Yeah, for sure. So I've always loved to cook and loved to entertain. And I adopted a plant-based diet about 10 years ago, and it was sort of happened instantaneously. So I watched a documentary called Earthlings, and I went from being a full-on omnivore to just eating plants after watching it, which is very unusual. I know that doesn't happen very often. So although I had studied nutritional science as an undergraduate, I still sort of had the question, can one get all the nutrients they need just eating plants? So I actually circled back to nutrition and I got a certificate in plant-based nutrition. And I also attended a number of cooking programs to learn about plant-based cuisine. And I was loving the food that I was making. But I was a little insecure about sharing it with my friends and my family. And as I said, I love to entertain. And I was still, I still wanted to entertain. So I thought, I'm going to do it. But I was afraid, are people going to feel the need to eat before they arrive? Are they going to leave hungry and eat when they got home? But I did it. And what I was hearing over and over again is I actually love these recipes. And organically, a culinary education business grew out of that. And organically, a catering business grew out of that. And what I was hearing over and over the years was, I would eat this way all the time if only you would cook for me. And of course, that made me happy. I was happy that people were enjoying the food, but I also felt like I can't cook for everybody. So to me, the next best thing was to write a cookbook, but to make it as user friendly as possible, because I wanted to feel like I was in the kitchen cooking with the cooks. And that was sort of the seed of an idea for my cookbook, Plans for You. And I'm really glad that I did it.
Yeah. And what I love about that story is that you not only took the personal side of this for you, but then also, the nutritional education side of it and the real life experience from talking to people who got to taste the recipes as you were working on them and developing them. So it's really kind of like a three-pronged approach to what ended up in this book. Um, and isn't it funny that people say, I would cook this way if only you could cook for me?
Yeah, it's really funny because recipes don't need to be difficult, and for any number of reasons, people get intimidated by the prep process, or finding the ingredients, or thinking it's going to take too long, or just not having confidence in the kitchen. And I think that as educators, as cookbook writers, really one of our goals is to give people confidence
Yeah.
so that they can do it for themselves.
Yeah. So
And
who
it's
are
very
you?
gratifying when you see and hear people say, I tried your recipe and I really love it.
Right. So who did you have in mind then when you were writing it? I know you mentioned some of the people said this to you, but was there anybody specifically you had in mind?
Yeah, so who I have in mind for writing the book is not people who are necessarily eating a plant-based diet. The cookbook's really written for omnivores, people who are looking to eat plant forward, people who are vegetarian, and maybe people also who eat a fully plant-based diet. What I was really looking to do is come up with recipes that were going to be satisfying, delicious, health promoting, planet friendly for anyone that was looking to add more plants to their plate. So it's people who are looking plant forward, I would basically say. And these days, there's so many people who are cooking for someone's coming to dinner who doesn't consume dairy, or someone's coming to dinner who's a pescatarian, or doesn't eat, has an allergy, whatever it is. So that's what I had in mind. It's really recipes so that you can turn to something and say, okay, I've got this one recipe that I know satisfies just about everybody, and people are going to leave feeling full and satisfied and delicious. And that's really who I had in mind writing the book.
Yeah, it's great. So what is Beantown Kitchen is the brand that you work under. Tell us a little bit about Beantown Kitchen.
Yeah, so I'm based in Boston, as I said. And for people that don't know, Beantown is Boston's nickname. So 10 years ago, when I said I adopted a plant-based diet rather suddenly, it didn't take me long to create a blog and start writing about my experiences and sharing the recipes I was creating. And I chose Beantown Kitchen for that reason. And I sort of like the play on words with the beans because beans are such an important component of a plant-forward diet.
Yeah.
When it came time to name my cookbook, I got feedback from my team, basically, that Beantown might be considered too regional, and also it might turn people off who don't yet love beans. So we decided to call the book Plants for You instead of Beantown Kitchen, but I still do my work under the name of Beantown Kitchen. My Instagram is Beantown Kitchen, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the cookbook isn't the Beantown Kitchen cookbook, but maybe in the future it might be.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the book then. And I like to do this kind of like from a high level, and then we'll work our way into the recipes and stories. But what about writing the book and like putting the book together? And how is it that you went about this task and decided what you wanted to put in the book?
So I had been writing about, there's a number of things. I knew that I wanted to have sort of the pre-recipe portion of the book, and I was glad that that is a thing because I had a lot of things I wanted to write about. Number one, my journey, but also I felt like sharing information about the plant-based prep process was important because people are intimidating by what they perceive to be all the chopping and the dicing. So I have steps for that. So I was sort of trying to get in the mind of the cook and think about what might be difficult for them and really help them be a guide in that way. So that's how I made those kind of decisions. I also happened to speak to or survey hundreds of people to find out what they find to be the difficult part of eating more plant-based. And if they aspire to eat a plant-based diet, what they find challenging. And based on my findings, I also have a section about that in the cookbook. So one thing, and again, I wanted to be super user-friendly. So I took some videos and I added those videos to my cookbook via QR codes. And for anyone that's writing a cookbook now, I can't recommend enough that technology, which I think is so fabulous. So you have a recipe, you think it's got multiple steps, it might be one of your more challenging ones. Video yourself making the recipe and then create a QR code and put that QR code in the book. And then it's almost like you're in the kitchen with the cook. So that was one thing I did. Another thing I did was I wanted my photographs to look like the recipes. I didn't want my photographs to be so aspirational that when the cook made them, they felt badly about themselves because they felt like they didn't do something right. So I took a lot of food photography courses and I made the recipes, and then I tried to create a beautiful image, but one that was really accurate to how the recipe would come out. And another thing that I did was I really had a very robust testing process. And this is something perhaps I know you have a lot of cookbook writers who listen, and this is something that I really love to talk about, and maybe this will be helpful for some people. So when it came to the testing process, I wanted each recipe to be tested at least 5 times. Again, I was very sympathetic to the cook. I didn't want them to try a recipe, it didn't work, and for them to think, oh my goodness, I'm not a good cook. I'm not good at this. I wanted the recipes to work. Best way to do that is test them very robustly. So I sent an email out to everyone on my newsletter, and I said, hey guys, as you may know, I'm writing a cookbook. I'm very excited about it. I could use your help. Is there anyone out there that might like to help me test recipes? If so, fill out this form. And I used a Google form. And in the form, I asked for some information like, what's your name? And how do I contact you? Are there any foods that you dislike, that you're allergic to, you have aversions to? Are there any types of dishes that you particularly want to test, whether it's soups or salads or desserts. And they could check the ones they wanted to test. Any types of cuisine you like, Italian, do you like Mexican, do you like Southeast Asian? And then I received all of this information back. I also asked them about appliances. Do you have a blender? Do you have a food processor? All this information came back. It was so fantastic because it was all populated into a spreadsheet for me. So when I had, for instance, a chocolate mousse recipe that I wanted to test, I could look through and see who wants to test desserts. And of those people, maybe someone says they don't like chocolate. So I was able to find out who to send the recipes to. Fantastic. Then the next step was I sent the recipes off. I had their email addresses, and I sent them an evaluation form, again, via Google. And in the evaluation form, I had them rate the recipes based on taste, texture, appearance. Would they make the recipe again? Did they encounter any problems? Was there anything confusing? How might they improve the recipe? And most important thing, well, not most important, but as important, would you like to test another recipe? So would you believe I had 58 testers? So this was a really big process, but it was phenomenal because one, I felt incredibly supported. I felt that I had a team of people who wanted to see this cookbook succeed. They wanted to see it printed. I was accountable. I had to keep myself moving. And they also were so fantastic in providing feedback. So most of them were sort of ordinary, everyday cooks, but I had some professional testers in the group. I also had some professional cooks in the group. And they gave me such great feedback. I would say they really helped me to elevate my recipes. And I could give you an example of that.
Yeah.
So one of my recipes, I love muhadra, a Middle Eastern rice and lentil dish with caramelized onions. In my cookbook, got good feedback about it. A couple of the testers said this could use a counterpoint. Two of them said the exact same thing. It could use something to balance the flavors, and they suggested some type of yogurt. Well, first of all, yogurt is dairy-based, but as it happens, there's also a number of fantastic plant-based yogurts. So I circled back to the recipe and I created a garlicky lemon yogurt sauce, added a pinch of salt to it, made the recipe and put a dollop of that on top with some chopped mint, and they were absolutely right. It took the dish to a whole nother level. It balanced the earthy tones of the lentils and the sweetness of the caramelized onion and the earthy tones of the cumin with this sort of salty, creamy yogurt, lemony dip. It was just, they're right. So that kind of thing, I am so grateful for my testers for that. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And I think testers, especially the ones that are just enthusiastic home cooks, are really perfect too for you, giving them these recipes to be sure that they're not too complicated and that the chopping and things that people are concerned about when they think about plant-based eating isn't like a barrier to them actually preparing the recipes.
Absolutely. And to find out, for instance, this took me X amount of time was very, very helpful because, maybe as recipe developers, we're used to chop, chop, chop in the kitchen and we can really get it done quickly. But to hear from them realistically how challenging the recipe is very useful.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the recipes that are in the book then, and some of your favorite recipes that you have that you want to highlight. Maybe we can talk about a couple to give people a flavor of what's in the book. We've talked about the lentil and caramelized onion, the way that you augmented it with the yogurt sauce. But what's another recipe that you'd like to really have the listeners hear about?
So one of the recipes that I think is pretty fun, and I get very good feedback about this recipe from all sorts of cooks, is crab cakes. And they're plant-based crab cakes, obviously. And what I find with cooking, it's really all about taste and texture. So I replicate the texture of crab using chickpeas and hearts of palm, which sort of can be flaky and fishy-like. And then the taste of crab cakes, why not use Old Bay seasoning? And that's going to make them taste like crab cakes. And then to give it a little bit of fishiness, I use some dulse or a kelp, one of those seaweed kind of flakes, and it adds a little bit of a quote ocean flavor to it. And this recipe is really fun because I shared it on my blog, and I heard from one of the cooks that she loved this so much that she bought the ingredients and she boxed them up and sent the ingredients with the recipe out to a bunch of her friends and family. And when that happens, you know it's a winner.
Yeah.
And another recipe, which is super popular, is a chocolate mousse with raspberries. Again, we think mousse, we think eggs, we think dairy. And the beauty of this is it's got no eggs, it's got no dairy. So it's fantastic when you have someone over who doesn't eat those things. It's a really popular dessert. And I've heard people call it like the gateway to plant-based eating, because it's one of, people who think, oh my God, oh my goodness, I could never eat plant-based. And they try this, they say, ooh, this is really good. Oh, it feels like familiar tastes and flavors. It's chocolatey, it's creamy. So they really like it.
Yeah.
Another really popular, I've got pizzas, I've got loads of, salads, and I've got sandwiches, and I've got sushi, and I've got dumplings, all kinds of things in the recipe. But one thing that comes to mind, which this tickles me, the story is I have crispy tofu in my cookbook. People think tofu, it's bland, it's tasteless, it's flavorless. The texture is really unappealing. And in my recipe, I really show people how to transform it into something really flavorful and crispy and savory and delicious. And one woman told me that she has 2 grandchildren, 2 boys. I think they're about 5 and 9. And she says her grandsons love this crispy tofu. And when they ask for it, she says she'll make it for them only if they behave. I'm like, okay, so you're bribing your grandchildren with like crispy tofu. It doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it just goes to show you that with the preparation and knowing how to do it, that the kids will even dive in.
Right, exactly. And they do. And they love to join her. Yeah, that reminds me. She told me there's another recipe I have, which is you've got some raspberries. They're not moldy, but they're mushy and they're not particularly appealing anymore. I have a recipe. Take those raspberries, make a chia jam with it. It's delicious. Raspberries, some sweetener, a little bit of lemon, chia, pulls it all together, put it in the fridge. It's so good. And she makes this with her grandchildren too.
That's wonderful. And I think that that's one way that when you have recipes like this that work and taste so good, people are willing to share them with family. And they probably in some sort of way become part of the repertoire of what they make. And that's spreading the good news about the plant-based eating and cooking throughout families. And a book like this that can really help them become and eat more plants is key to being able to do that. So when you actually wrote the book and you connected with all these testers, what are some of the rewards of doing this? So I get the question a lot. A lot of people like, is it really worth it to write the book?
Oh my
was
God.
This book, was it worth it for you? And if it was, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. So worth it. So there have been so many benefits, and you mentioned the testers. So connecting with a wonderful community of testers and research participants has been incredibly rewarding for me. I mean, it's all about the connections we make with other humans, and I feel really blessed that way. Certainly getting out of my comfort zone and seeing a project from start to finish, there's something very rewarding about that. Opening that initial box of books, it took me 3 hours to have the guts to open the box, to look at it, because I was perhaps afraid of being disappointed, and I wasn't. And that was incredibly rewarding and gratifying that the books looked like I expected they would, and I was really pleased with them. Definitely hearing from people, this is really surprising. People are telling me they're reading the book cover to cover. So that is a surprise, very gratifying, and that they're loving the recipes. The book launching mid-September. Prior to then, sold so many books I had to order a second print run. So for sure, that has been really rewarding. And then sharing a message I care deeply about. So uh, eating more plants is, plant-based foods are tend to be low in saturated fat. They're devoid of cholesterol. They're high in antioxidants, high in phytonutrients. And all of these things are components that are consistent with minimizing disease risk. So sharing that message, but also one of the single most impactful things we as individuals can do for the health of the planet is put more plants on our plate. So the cookbook is an opportunity to share that message. And I feel thrilled that every day, 3 times a day, people can do something to have an impact for the planet. So that's been super rewarding. And then finally, now I'm able to go on book tour and meet people. And it doesn't get more fun than that. Yeah, to be able to share the food, to share the message, and to meet people.
Yeah. And because that kind of brings it all home when you actually get to, see people that are interested in the topic, interested in what you have to say, interested in your book. It's a true joy to be able to do that. Let's talk a little bit about the comfort zone and what the comfort zone. It's so comfortable in the comfort zone. I love the comfort zone. And I was actually just thinking about this morning, like, is there anything I'm not doing in my life right now because it would be uncomfortable? And because I need to get uncomfortable to accomplish it. And there probably are some things. And I think for a lot of people that are listening, there's projects that we just won't go after them because we have to get uncomfortable. And what happened with your journey? What discomfort did this require for you?
Oh, wow. Yes. My husband has a mug. He's had it for decades. And it says, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And honestly, I would look at that mug and say, what on earth is he talking about? That makes no sense for me. I'm quite happy in my comfort zone and I feel like I'm living life. But wait until you have a message you desperately want to share. But in order to do that, you need to learn all sorts of things that feel like they're going to be very difficult. You have to put yourself out there and risk people not listening to the message. You have to fail in whatever way that might mean. So yes, that's really difficult. And I have to say, now that I have gotten out of my comfort zone, I understand what he means about there being a real sense of sort of joy and aliveness that comes with that. So what was really helpful for me is a book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art. I actually listened to it as a book on tape. The reader was fantastic. I love listening to, like, while I'm cooking, I listen. While I'm walking, I listen. So he talks about overcoming resistance, which I think is sort of this the desire to stay in our comfort zone. And he says the reason we want to stay there is because the resistance we want to stay there because it's comfortable, but the resistance comes from self-doubt, from self-sabotage. And he suggests leaning in and knowing that these feelings mean that you're doing something that matters. And it was really helpful for me to keep that in mind. And also he talks about creating rituals. And I really took that to heart. So I did create some rituals while I was in this full-on recipe creation, cookbook writing, recipe testing, editing, that mode. And my rituals are, one, to create a to-do list every morning. Very, very helpful for me. I know not everybody loves to-do lists. For me, I get kind of an endorphin rush every time I do something and I check it off. And that's a little motivating for me. I also do something that you might consider a little on the woo-woo side, but I close my eyes and I invite creative energies to support and inspire me. And Stephen Pressfield calls this invoking the muse. And I'm just like, okay, well, I mean, if they're out there, as he says they are, come and help me. I love the creativity and the inspiration that might come my way. And then the third thing that I did, he talks about going pro. He says, treat this like you're a true professional. And I suppose, took that literally because, as I said, I had studied nutritional science as an undergrad. And then after that, I became a high school chemistry teacher. So I considered my kitchen my science lab. And when it came time to testing recipes, creating recipes, I took very careful notes about what I was doing, like I was writing into a lab book. I changed one variable at a time as I was creating the recipes. And then I would compare the new recipe to a control group. And then I would chase my poor husband around the house morning, noon, and night. Is it better this way or this way? Is it better this way or this way? Until I just kept at it until I was satisfied. And once I got to that point, at that point, the recipes were heading off to the recipe testers. So believe me, I got out of my comfort zone writing this book. But between the great community of testers and these rituals I just mentioned, and my husband is one of the greatest cheerleaders around, I got it done.
Yeah. And I think that resistance is something that is so common. And I 100% agree that most of the time, if we're feeling it, we don't just like run around always like feeling resistance, but if we're really truly feeling it, it probably is a calling from something that we need to do. And self-doubt is so common in the cookbook space, mainly because, and I don't know if we see it because we're in the space, like people that don't write cookbooks probably don't ever even think about it. But, food is such a abundant topic. There's a lot of different people with a lot of different messages about food and cooking from a variety of perspectives. So we often start to wonder, like, what else do I possibly even have to add to this topic?
That's so true. And people are so opinionated about foods.
Yeah.
And right. And when you start getting in the voice of other people is in your head, that can be very self-sabotaging. Yeah. So yeah, the rituals are very helpful for keeping you on track. And I agree with you. Like it's not uncommon for cookbook authors to feel this way.
Yeah. The nice thing though about a print book project though is that you don't have to be in that mode for forever, because it's a finite project. A book has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And like you mentioned, though, one of the benefits for you is that you learned how to see a project like this through from beginning to completion, and, actually having print books arrive at your house. And, the fun thing, though, is sometimes, though, I bet once you've incorporated this into your routine, it's kind of the ritual, even outside of writing the book. I suspect some of these things probably are still practices that you have in your life that you developed because of writing the book.
Most definitely. I still write a list every morning.
Yeah.
I'm still developing recipes. So I'm still in my food science lab. And I definitely still, meditate / mindfulness / invoke the muse.
Yeah. I think that if an idea is out there floating around, I've often heard it say it's looking for somebody to like put it down, to like capture it and put it in their work. And if we're not in the position to do that, the ideas will never find its way through us. It's going to go find its way through someone else that's in the position to actually take the notes and do what it's, what the idea wants to do. And Elizabeth Gilbert, I probably maybe told the story in the podcast, in her book, Big Magic, she talks about that. She talks about starting a novel and then just like, she says, I can't write this book. She puts it in a drawer. 10 years later, she meets another writer who's writing a book about the same thing.
Yeah, incredible. Incredible.
And she feels like they had met at some point, that this idea moved. It went from her.
The energy went from her. Yeah, she felt a connection.
Yes.
And if you, it happened to me once in a while I was writing the book, where an idea came to me and I thought, I have no idea where that came from. That feels inspired. It's definitely from out of me. I'm very glad it came to me. And it's quite a feeling. Yeah.
Another thing I want to encourage people to do is to enlist the help of your community, because like you did with talking to your email list, people want to help. And these professional cooks and testers were so open to giving you tips for maybe adding that next little thing that's going to like elevate the recipe, that it just goes to show that 9 times out of 10, we all want each other to succeed in our own way, and how much fun it is to connect with people in pursuit of these goals and bring them in and include them. And I do want to ask a question. Some people would say, well, I would be afraid that people wouldn't respond or that they might say they want to test and it doesn't work out. How did you handle something like that?
Oh, right. Okay. So I mentioned 58 testers. I think I had probably 80
Yeah.
responses. And then I wrote, I sent out assignments to all 80 people. And then, some may not respond, or some say, I thought I could do it, but it turns out I don't have time, or says, like, can you get back to me later? And it's not personal, right? And again, you remember those feelings where it might feel personal and you might think, nah, I'm not going to stick with it, or this isn't right for me. Those are all self-sabotage thoughts, right? That's back to the press field. So sort of staying the course. And I agree. I mean, people can be amazing cheerleaders, and the way they rallied around me for this. And so there's something interesting about that. So I'm very, very grateful. I have a friend in publishing who said something to me I didn't forget, and it was very helpful for writing this book. She said, ink is cheap. And what she meant was, go ahead and thank everybody.
Yeah.
You don't need to skimp on thanking people. So I wrote to all my testers and I said, I'd like to thank you in the book. Are you okay with me printing your name? And most of them were. And I think for me, it's an opportunity to show them how integral they were to the process. And for them, perhaps it makes them feel good to see their name in print.
100%. 100%.
Yeah,
And they're like, oh, that this is the book I helped test. I mean, it really does give a buy-in to your book. And they're probably in a way already promoting your book, talking about it, excited about it coming out. It's like this whole little community of people that are invested in the work that you all did together to
yeah,
test these recipes. So that's wonderful. And I think that, testers do not have to be paid. They could be paid if you're under pressure and you were like under a deadline. But it's wonderful to include other people in the testing of the book, and you get such good feedback before the book's even out about
sure.
their successes with the book and how they like things and how they taste it. So it's wonderful that you did that.
Thank you.
So as we're kind of wrapping up, one of the things I like to talk about is other cookbooks, things that you have maybe influenced you in the work that you do, because none of us operate in a vacuum. We have books all around us, books we see, books we've been inspired by. So what's a favorite cookbook of yours, Diana?
So I have a book that I believe is in the cookbook section of the big box bookstores, but you might not necessarily think of a cookbook, but it's on my cookbook shelf and I absolutely love it. And it's called, it's Karen Page's The Vegetarian Flavor Bible. And it's a culinary guide for basically flavor pairing. So it provides me with tremendous creative inspiration. So for instance, I went to the farmer's market the other day and I saw a green there that I have not cooked with before. And it turns out it's shiso, which is otherwise known as Japanese basil. And I get home and I open up the book and I look up shiso and it shows me all of the different ingredients that pair very nicely with shiso. And it tells me it's Japanese cuisine. And there's actually a few different potential 3 or 4 ingredients together that she suggests might make for a nice recipe. And I got super pumped. And along with the shiso, there's mention of different herbs and spices and fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds. And then I created a dish with tofu and cucumbers and ginger, miso. There was some sesame oil, some soy sauce, shiitake mushrooms, and then the shiso. And it was delicious, all because of this cookbook. Or I call it a cookbook because to me, I look at it, I see the ingredients, I've got the dish in my mind, and I'm off and running. So I really love that book.
Yeah, that's great. And I'll link to that in the show notes.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I believe in the beginning you mentioned that people can connect with you online through your brand name and your Beantown Kitchen, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I'll link to that also in the show notes because it sounds like it was across all different channels that people can find you and connect with you online that way.
Right. Exactly. Thank you.
Yep. So any final parting words or advice for cooks who need to eat more plants or want to eat more plants?
Experiment, enjoy them. There's loads of recipes out there. If you're inspired by videos, check out TikTok or Instagram. There's tons of bloggers, great cookbooks. Just experiment and enjoy them. And if you're thinking, I want to eat more plants, but how am I ever going to feel full and satisfied with them? Here's a tip. These are some ways to feel very full and satisfied. Beans are great for very protein rich. You'll feel full and satisfied. Starchy vegetables like potatoes, corn, squashes are also great for feeling full and satisfied. And then lots of flavor from herbs and spices and stuff like that. So
wonderful. Yeah. Terrific. And I think that everyone's going to enjoy Diana's book, Plants for You, Everyday Elevated, Nutrient-Rich, Planet-Friendly Recipes. We wish you the best of luck with the promotion of your book just released. I hope you have a lot of fun with all the events, and it's been terrific to have you on the show. And thanks again for all the information that you shared, not only about cooking, but a lot of really great tips about rituals and resistance and the things we often feel when we embark on a project that's new.
Thank you, Maggie. I've loved talking to you.
Thank you. Have a great day, and everybody enjoy the fall. And, this is a great time for cookbooks and looking into maybe some new ways of cooking. And this book will certainly help you to do that. So thanks again for coming on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green, and until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.